Eros and Psyche, Chapter 10. Chapter 10. At the command of the goddess the nymphs gathered round Psyche, and, binding her hands with chains of roses, led her away to the garner. Here they set her free, and with peals of merry laughter bade her farewell. "Pray to the 100-handed one, maiden, to help thee," cried one. "Thy 2 hands will not go far." "Nay, an 100 hands could not sort the grain by sunrise," said another. "Better to work with 2 hands," said Psyche, "than idly to pray for 10,000. But for all her brave answer her heart sank as she looked at the task before her, for she stood in the largest garner it had ever been her lot to see. Wide and lofty as her father's palace halls, and all the floor was strewn with seeds and grain of every kind. Wheat, oats and barley, millet, beans and maize, which she must sort each after its kind into a separate heap before the sun should rise. However, she set diligently to work, and minute after minute, hour after hour passed swiftly by, and the heaps kept growing by her side. Yet for all her toil it vast but a tiny corner of the garner she had cleared. Feverishly she worked on, not daring to look at what remained to do. Her back ached, her arms grew stiff, and her eyes felt heavy as lead, but she worked as one in a dream, and her head kept falling on her breast for weariness, till at length she could hold out no longer, but fell fast asleep upon the cold stone floor. While she slept a marvelous thing happened. From every hole and crack there appeared an army of ants, black ants, white ants, red ants swarming and tumbling over each other in their haste. Over the whole floor of the garner they spread, and each one carried a grain of seed, which it placed upon its own heap and ran quickly back for another. Such myriads were there, and so quickly did they work, that by the time the first ray of the sun peeped in at the windows the floor was clear, save for the heaps of sorted grain standing piled up in the midst. The bright light pouring in at the window fell upon Psyche as she slept, and with a start she awoke and began feverishly to feel about for the grain. When her eyes became accustomed to the light, how great was her joy and thankfulness to see the neat heaps before her. And as she looked round, wondering who could have been so kind a friend, she saw the last stragglers of the ants hurrying away to every crack and cranny. "Oh kind little people," she cried, "how can I thank you?" She had no time to say more, for the door was thrown open, and in a golden flood of sunlight the nymphs came dancing in. Seeing the floor cleared and the bright heaps lying on the floor, they stopped short in amazement. "Verily thou hast wrought to some purpose, maiden," said one. "Nay, she could never have done it of herself," said another. "True, O bright-haired ones," answered Psyche. "I toiled, and my labor did but mock me, and at length my strength gave way and I fell asleep upon the floor. But the little folk had pity on me, and came out in myriads and sorted out the grain till all was finished. And lo! The task is accomplished. We will see what our queen shall say to this," they answered. And binding her once more in their rosy chains, they led her to Aphrodite. "Hast thou swept my garner, Psyche, and sorted the grain each after its kind?" she asked. "Thy garner is swept and thy grain is sorted, lady," she replied, "and therein I wrought the little my feeble strength could bear. When I failed the little folk came forth and did the task." Trembling, she waited for the answer, for she feared that in the very first trial she had failed. But Aphrodite answered, "Why dost thou tremble, Psyche? The task is accomplished, and that is all I ask, for well do I know the little folk help only those who help themselves. 2 more tasks must thou do before I put thee to the final proof. Shayest thou yon shining river? On the other bank graze my flocks and herds. Precious are they beyond all telling, for their skins are of pure gold. Go, now, and fetch me 1 golden lock by sunset." So saying, she signed to the nymphs to release Psyche, who went at once towards the stream, light-hearted, for this task, she thought, would be no hard one after the last. As she approached the river she saw the cattle feeding on the further bank, sheep and oxen, cows and goats, their golden skins gleaming in the sunlight. Looking about for some means of crossing, she espied a small boat moored among the reeds. Entering it, she unloosed the rope and pushed out into the stream. As she did so, one of the bulls on the further shore looked up from his grazing and saw her. With a snort of rage he galloped down the field, followed by the rest of the herd. Right down to the water's edge they came, lashing their tails and goading with their horns, and an ill landing would it have been for Psyche had she reached the shore. Hastily she pushed back among the reeds, and pondered what she must do, but the more she thought the darker grew her lot. To get one single hare from the golden herd she must cross the stream, and, if she crossed, the wild bulls would goad her to death. At length in despair she determined to meet her doom, if only to show that her love was stronger than death. As she bent over the boat to loose the rope, a light breeze set the reeds a-whispering, and one seemed to speak to her. "Fair lady, leave us not, for those who reach the further shore return not to us again. Farewell, then, forever, gentle reed, for I have a task to do, though I die in the vain attempt. Ah, lady, stay here and play with us. Too young and fair art thou to die. No coward is young or fair, kind reed. And before sunset I must win a lock from a golden fleece yonder, or I shall never find my love again." And she let loose the rope. "Stay, stay, gentle maiden. There I can help thee, for all my life have I watched the golden herds, and I know their ways. All day long they feed in the pleasant pasture, and woe to those who would cross over when the sun is high in heaven. But towards evening, when he is sinking in the far west, the herdsman of Aphrodite cometh and driveth them home to their stalls for the night. Then mayest thou cross with safety and win a lock from the golden herd." But Psyche laughed aloud at his words. "Thou biddest me steal the apples when the tree is bare. Thy heart is kind, O reed, but thy tongue lacketh wisdom. Fare thee well. Not so fast, lady. Shayest thou not the tall ram yonder by the thorn bush? Sweet grows the grass beneath its shade, yet to reach it he must leave a golden tribute on the thorns. Even now there is a lock of his fleece caught in the branches. Stay with us till the herds are gone, lady, and then canst thou win the lock of gold. O kindest of reeds, forgive my blindness. 'Tis more than my life thou hast saved, for, with the task undone, I should lose my love forever." So all day long she stayed and talked with the reeds, and they told her that often folk came down to the stream and pushed out for the other bank. But when the cattle rushed raging to the water's edge they turned back afraid, and dared not venture forth again, but went home disconsolate. And so they heard not the whispering of the reeds nor learnt the secret of winning the golden lock. Now the shadows were falling fast, and away in the distance Psyche heard the horn of the herdsman and his voice calling the cattle home. At the sound they lifted their heads, and made for the gate on the far side of the field. As soon as they were safely through, Psyche pushed out the boat and rowed to the other bank. Swiftly she made for the thorn bush and picked the golden lock from the bough, and as the boat glided back to the reeds, the sun sank low behind the hills. Close at hand she heard the laughter of the nymphs as they came to see whether the task were done. With a smile she drew the lock of gold from her bosom, and, marveling, they led her back to Aphrodite. "Thou hast a brave heart, Psyche," said the goddess, as she looked at the golden lock at her feet. "The bravest heart could not have won this lock, lady, without knowing the secret which the reeds whispered to me. Well do I know that, Psyche. But 'tis only the pure in heart that can understand the voice of the wind in the reeds, and thus doubly have I tried thee. Take now this crystal bowl for thy third task. Beyond this pleasant vale thou wilt come to a dark and barren plain. On the far side a mighty mountain rears his peak to heaven, and from the summit a spring gushes forth and falls headlong over the precipice down into the gulf below. Go now and get me a draught of that stream, but see that thou break not the goblet on the way, for its worth is beyond all telling." In truth, as she held it out, the crystal gleamed brighter than the rainbow. Psyche took the goblet, and the first rays of the sun found her already on the plain. Far away on the other side the mountain peak rose barren and black against the sky, and she hurried on as fast as her feet would go, lest night should fall ere she had filled the goblet. On and on she went, and at length she drew near to the mountain and looked about for a path leading up to the summit. But naught could she see save rocks and boulders and masses of crumbling stones, and there was nothing for it but to set to work to climb the rough mountain side. Clasping the goblet tightly in one hand, she clung to the rocks as best she might with the other, fearing at every step that she would slip and break her precious burden. How she ever reached the top she never knew, but at length she stood, bruised and torn, upon the summit. What was her dismay when she saw that the mountain peak was divided by a mighty cleft, and across the abyss she saw the stream of water gushing out from the steep rock 100 feet and more below the summit. Even had she toiled down again and up on the other side, the rock fell away so smooth and sheer that a mountain goat would have no ledge on which to rest his foot. Psyche sat down upon a rock to think what she must do, and the more she thought the more she felt that her last hour had come. For the only way I can reach the water is to throw myself into the bottomless abyss, where the stream flows deep down into the bowels of the earth. And I should be dashed to pieces, but perchance the king of the underworld would have mercy on me, and let my soul return but once on earth to bear the crystal bowl to Aphrodite. So saying, she stood and bade farewell to the earth and the pleasant sunlight and the fair flowers that she loved, and prepared to throw herself over the mountain side. As she was about to spring from the edge, she heard the whirring of wings above her head, and a mighty eagle flew down and settled on the rock beside her. Far up above thy head, in the blue sky, have I watched thee, Psyche, and seen thy labors on the mountain side. Too brave and true art thou to go to thy death. Give me the goblet, and I will fill it. Knowest thou that yonder stream is a jet which springeth up from dark Cocytus, the river of wailing, which watereth the shores of the dead? No mortal can touch of that water and live, or bear it away in a vessel of earth. But this goblet is the gift of Zeus Almighty, and I am his messenger. The only bird of heaven that can look on the sun in his might. Give me the cup, then, and I will fill it, and bear it to the mountain foot, that thou mayest carry it back in safety. With tears of joy and thankfulness Psyche gave him the goblet, and as he flew away across the dark chasm, swift as an arrow from the bow, she turned and sped down the mountain side, heeding not the stones and boulders, so glad was she at heart. At the foot she found the eagle awaiting her. O mightiest of birds, how can I thank thee? She cried. To have served thee, lady, is all the thanks I need. Farewell, and may the gods prosper thee in thy last great trial. And he spread his mighty wings and flew away. Psyche watched him till he grew but a tiny speck in the blue of the sky. Then she turned and hastened across the plain with her precious goblet of water. The nymphs danced put to meet her as before, and led her to Aphrodite. I see thou art fearless and true, maiden, she said, when Psyche had told her tale. Twice hast thou faced death without flinching, and now must thou go down to his own land. For no woman is worthy of my son's love, if she possess not beauty immortal that fadeth not with passing years. And she alone, the queen of the dead, can give thee this gift. Take this casket, then, and go and kneel before her and beg her to give thee therein the essence of that beauty. When thou hast it, see thou hasten swiftly back and open not the casket. For if its fumes escape and overcome thee in the world below, thou must dwell forever with the shades. So Psyche took the casket, and her heart sank within her at the thought of that dread journey. And the nymphs waved sadly to her as she went away, for never yet had they looked on one who had returned from the dark land of shadows.